All right, we are back with another episode of Summer Showcase Northern Lights, covering one of our favorite leagues here at the Shady Sports Network, which is, of course, the Canadian Football League. I'm joined by my co-host, Michael Washington. Michael, how are you doing tonight?
Ready to talk some football. I mean, the CFL is in full swing. We got 4 games coming up this week. One game a day again. So I can't complain.
Absolutely, and obviously we're gonna kick off this episode much like we kick off every other one, and we'll take a look back at the games that happened last week. A lot of great games, and then after that we've got some huge injury news to get to, which I think is going to be very influential down the stretch for multiple teams here. And then we'll also go ahead and give you our predictions and previews for next week real quick. And then we'll wrap it up and we'll see you guys next week. So hopefully we'll keep it nice, short, sweet, and to the point. But here is the first game of the weekend. I see you shaking your head there.
With as long-winded as I am, I don't think we'll end up keeping this as short as we hope.
It's okay. I'm also long-winded. I like to talk a lot. That's why I host a podcast. So,
Right.
if you like to hear me talk, you guys should definitely subscribe to Shady Sports Network. Michael also likes to talk. That's why we're here, and we get along so well. So, speaking of which, let's start off like this. There's been a lot of talk about the injuries that had happened in this Edmonton-Ottawa game due to the lack of time between the two games, right? There was a 5-day stretch between the last time they played in Edmonton, then they both traveled back to Ottawa, and then played in this game 5 days later. It's been all over social media. Everybody's been talking about the distance between these two games. What do you make about the fact that they played 5 days separate from each other, and then it coincidentally immediately, we saw the injury attrition?
I know McLeod Bethel Thompson's been really loud and talkative about this. I know he's been, kind of harping on the scheduling aspect of it. For me, it's weird to see or hear because, in the NFL they have games on Thursday, and if they play on Sunday, it's a short turnaround, right? So I mean, what is that? Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, and then they play on Thursday. So there's a 3-day break in there, and then into Thursdays. And I don't think the data shows enough that it's an increase in injuries. Now, I'm sure that there's some soreness issues. I'm sure there might be a couple minor issues that come out of it overall, whether it's cramping or some tweaks or whatever. But overall, major injuries, not so much. So 5 days seems okay. I'm not really sure why this game. If this game had been played on Thursday, then I guess then you could make a little more of a case. But this game was Friday. It was the early game on Friday, so I don't know, man. It's hard. Like I'm sure there's some kind of correlation to it, but I just don't think the data proves that there's enough of it. Because if that was the case, I really wouldn't see the NFL. Even though I know that's a lot of these leagues are money driven, but I really wouldn't see the NFL or some of these other leagues only do 3 to 4 days rest as often as they do. With that being said, for the player safety portions of it, I wish that they did give longer times between, especially with professional football. But you can make this case about hockey being a physical sport. I mean, I don't think it's as physical as it used to be, but and they play every other night. So
Yeah.
I could see it from both perspectives. I could see it from the league perspective as it's concerned, and just being like, guys, like it's 4 days in between, and I could see it from a player perspective and wanting to protect themselves as well. I just don't think the data suggests enough, personally, from a league perspective to make any changes.
I see it a little bit of both ways.
Yeah.
I'm a huge advocate of player safety, obviously.
Mhm.
We're very firmly entrenched in the player side of things here. So, I mean, obviously, I try to lean toward their perspective in this a little bit. But
Yeah.
at the same time, I also understand from a league perspective, first of all, it's best for viewership in order for them to stretch those games out. So they're
Correct.
more likely to grab casual viewers of the CFL on every single game across the board, even if your team's not playing on that specific night, because you're going to watch some CFL football, right? With that in mind, I like that they stretch the games out. And I like it from a selfish perspective, which I have said online, very publicly, is my schedule is very, very crazy a lot of the time. So I have a hard time ever sitting down and watching a full game start to finish. And a lot of times I have to go back and watch that game at, 6 o'clock the next morning and watch that back half of it and try to like shield myself from social media for a night and stuff like that to get the results without hearing exactly what happened, which is incredibly difficult. But, at least it gives me time between each game, right? But logistically, from a league perspective, you to have to try and game plan around giving them more than that 5-day gap while also having not the same opponents on every day of the week. That's extremely difficult to work with, even with 3 bye weeks, even with odd teams. I really think that would just be a nightmare logistically to try
Yeah.
and figure out to where no team ever has that 5-day gap. Now, can you find ways to limit it? Absolutely. Can you expand rosters? Are there multiple different ways you can kind of try and help with the injury attrition? Absolutely. And I think there's ways to address it, but I think it's being a little blown out of proportion at the same time too. And I've been part of that as well, because again, I'm trying to advocate for player safety, but at the same time, I see your point behind this. There is definitely other leagues that have a shorter turnaround time, and it is definitely something where, um, you know, it's just kind of is what it is currently until they move into the back half of the season and you no longer have the Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday games.
Yeah, I don't. I mean, I don't want to make it seem like I'm not on the, not advocating for the players by any means. It's just I look at it from a standpoint, from a league standpoint as well, because at the end of the day, if the league starts making really good money and starts getting the viewerships and the sponsorships coming in, then the players will see the back half of that, right? Like eventually, it's just the way that those leagues work. The more the money that's being made, the higher the salary cap goes up. The higher salary cap means the bigger the contracts, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, across the board. So, especially with players unions and everything else, I get it. I also understand from from a Clyde Bethel Thompson situation where he's a little bit older, so maybe it's just his body's not responding the way that he would have if he was like 24, 25. But um, and I know that he's been the biggest voice of this. So this situation, I think, also was probably a lot more sensitive, height and sensitivity wise too, because of the Chris Jones situation, right? Like he was let go during the week. There were some players that weren't really sure what was going to happen because he was the one that was also the GM, and you know what I mean. So it's like maybe there was just some like irritability around around Edmonton as a whole, and because it sparked with this really topic of the conversation really started with an MBT comment made after the game, and it just you know how social media is, they hang on to one thing and it festers into something more than what it really is in that situation. So uh I mean, I don't think we'll see a ton of it over the course of the year, but I'm sure there's going to be some teams that are going to have to end up dealing with this. So it's just going to be up to the players to just kind of, I guess, as much as I hate to say this, suck it up from a standpoint and protect yourself. That's all I could say. Like bust your ass and protect yourself um, as best as you can, right?
Absolutely. No matter where you're watching right now, if you could just do a huge solid and hit that like button, we really appreciate it. It helps kind of recommend us out to new viewers, and we definitely could use the assistance for sure on that matter. But on this game, obviously, there's another big storyline that came out of this because the Chris Jones change, prompted some questions about Trey Ford. You have a coaching change. Why wouldn't there be a quarterback change, especially when you're winless, right? Well, there wasn't necessarily a quarterback change, but as you can see with the statistics pulled up here, Trey Ford got in the game. He was used in the game plan. So how do you feel about the way they use Trey Ford? And do you think this is enough to not only quell the fans' interest in him, but also at the same time get him to a point where he can, maybe start developing and become that guy long term?
I mean, there's really nothing to develop per se. Like he just needs the reps. At the end of the day, Edmonton is what, winless in this situation. They're 0-6, and um, Trey Ford actually had the best record under Chris Jones than any of his other quarterbacks combined. He had more wins, less losses. I mean, he didn't start as many games as some of the other ones, but overall, like his win percentage was higher than any other quarterback. Uh, I don't advocate for players losing their jobs, and I don't advocate for um, QBs being blamed for stuff. But I think this Edmonton team would really benefit from maybe trying to start Trey over McLeod Bethel Thompson. I know MBT's been playing lights out. He's been throwing the ball well. He has pretty high accuracy across the board. And it's not his fault that the team is 0-6. Like, let's face it. I mean, there's a lot of one loss. This was another single digit loss here in this game too. However, you are 0-6, and if you don't find a spark, you're going to be looking on the outside in again from a playoff perspective. And in a league with 9 teams and 6 of them make the playoffs, like you really don't want to be that team that's sitting outside in that 3 spot again. I think that it will be good for Ford. Again, though, a lot of the questions do come from the fact is what his mental preparation. Is he doing what he needs to do to get on the field? And is he capable of leading this team to at least make some moves? But I think you have to make it. You have to try. I think you have to try, and that's just where I'm at with that. Like I just feel like you need to.
Yeah, I mean, at this point, I don't have the exact, numbers in front of me, but there's definitely a situation where Edmonton has not been very good for the past couple seasons, especially since they drafted Trey Ford first overall. You don't get a first overall pick for no reason, right? So, I mean, since then, they've spent more time losing than they have winning. So, at what point do you just throw the guy in and roll with him? I mean, I know there was a couple situations like that. I think it was in 2022, if I remember correctly, where he really got a stretch to like start some games, and maybe that's what opened up some of the question marks about him that we hear still to this day. But when you have a dynamic athlete like that, and you're just losing, I don't really see the benefit to continue to start McLeod Bethel Thompson. Now, for the record, and I mean, obviously, if you're watching this network, you've probably seen some of our interviews. We're fans of MBT. He's been on the network. He's a great guy. We want to root for him. But at the same time, at what point do you just give the keys to the young guy and let him figure it out? Because if you don't, are you ever going to figure out if he is the guy, or are you just going to continue to play this game where you're bringing in a veteran every year to push him or to start ahead of him until he's quote unquote ready, and he just never gets to that point? It's a big question mark right now.
Well, it's just more or less along the lines of like we're talking about MBT. He played in the UFL or the USFL, took a year off and was contemplating possibly retirement in general, and got the itch to come back. And Edmonton called, and like how much does he actually have left in the tank too overall? Like, is he going to be able to spend the whole season doing what he's doing right now? Like, it looks great because a year off and he got himself into shape and stuff, and he's a fantastic quarterback. Like, don't get me wrong. Like I said, we're fans of MBT here. It's just reality has to set in at some point in time for some of these guys, right? He took a lot of hits when he was with New Orleans. He's been taking some hits this year with Edmonton. Like, his body really is not going to continue on this path. So I'm glad they introduced Trey Ford into the game plan. He did not. It was one drive though. Like, you have to introduce him further, especially in these close games. Like, you need to give him the chance to be the difference maker. And I feel like that they were like, well, MBT gives us the best chance at winning, which may be very possibly true. but you haven't been winning. So, you got to light a fire somewhere.
I agree. And if at some point, you don't send a message to the team that anybody can be replaced, at what point does this thing turn around in anyway? So I mean, if McLeod Bethel Thompson can be taken out of the starting lineup at some point, then anybody on this team could be as well. So I think that sends a large message to everybody on the team. If you're watching right now, we want to hear your thoughts. So let us know what you think about the Trey Ford situation. Should they bench MBT? Should they trade him while they have an opportunity? I mean, there are some other teams that have some injuries, which we'll get to in a couple minutes here, and I'm sure we'll hear some more about MBT when we talk about that. But anyway, back to the game here. Ottawa once again finds a win against Edmonton. This is obviously back-to-back weeks. This game actually had a little bit bigger deficit than the last game. I think we both actually, you picked Edmonton, if I'm not mistaken.
I did.
Were you surprised to ultimately see the result here, or I mean, was it a situation where you were wondering if they were going to get a spark because of Jackson?
Yeah, I was just curious to whether or not this team was going to respond. And clearly they still have a lot of the same issues, even under Jackson. No run game. What is that? 12 carries total there. I mean, that's not going to do it. That's not going to cut it. Especially where you're so one-dimensional. You take a look at some of the averages, and this is just from from the stat box. I mean, I watched the game, but if you just look at the stat watching wise, you have 12 targets going to one guy, but then you have 8 down here to Gittins for 6 for 17 yards. You're not. It's too much around the line of scrimmage. Like, you have to be able to stretch the field a little bit. Arkell Smith, we got involved, which was nice to see, for 13.3 yards, but it didn't really feel like any of it was really stretching the field, right? Like, you look at, with Smith, who I just mentioned, 24 yards yak. Like, that's cool that he had 40 yards, but 24 of it came, after the catch. So how much of that was a catch and run from a 2-3 yard, out, slant, in, whatever you want to call them. And that's really kind of where I think Edmonton just they don't have a field stretcher, and they need to find a way to stretch that field a little bit to open things up. And normally the run game would help with that because of play action, but they don't have a run game to speak of, and that's been the story of Edmonton this entire game, the entire season. And it doesn't help their defense out because the offense gets off the field so fast.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm not saying that he's necessarily the entire answer, but you have a dynamic athlete like Javon Leake on your roster. Why are you not using him in more of a receiver role? If you need somebody who's going to stretch the field for you. I'm not saying, again, he's a running back by trade, but he can obviously catch the ball. So get him on some wheel routes, get him out of the backfield, some one-on-ones with a linebacker, get creative. You just, like you said, you have to stretch the field. You have to do more. And that might be even more reason why we should see more of Trey Ford. McLeod Bethel Thompson is not going to, escape the pocket. He's not going to force defenses to account for him. Trey Ford can and will. So that's another wrinkle that you can add into that offense that might actually help your run game, which we keep talking about, and at the same time, give you another element in the passing game to help you stretch the field a little bit. You get Trey Ford scrambling around, you give that receiver a little bit more time to get downfield, get open, you might get some more big plays.
So, the leak thing I want to say real quick is, you mentioned the wheel routes. There was a wheel route that took place in the third quarter for Edmonton that put them deep into Ottawa territory. I think it was a wheel route that went 42 yards, I believe, to Leak. He busted it open. There was a holding penalty. So, one of the biggest things that Edmonton has been having issues with too is the same issues that we keep seeing from certain teams in other leagues that are right on the cusp of stuff, and they just shoot themselves in the foot. And that they gotta clean that up too.
Absolutely. And in terms of stretching the field, I mean, you look over on the other side and you've got 4 receivers, 5, 6 receivers here that have over 10 yards per catch, and that's basically the majority of their offense. And obviously that's not the end all be all here, but at some point you got to be able to force some defenses to make decisions. Right now you're allowing them to basically key in on the short to intermediate passing game, and they're not doing anything in the run game either. You're handicapping yourself in multiple different ways there, and basically just here you go, figure it out. I mean, to every other defense that you play, because you're not changing anything from what I've seen so far.
The thing that sticks out to me the most is the yak. Like if you go back up and take a look at this yak, like 12.2 yards for average, but 4-yard yak. 11.2 but 9-yard yak, 17.7 but 10. That's telling me that they're making these plays down the field. In comparison to with Edmonton, where you see the average, but you see the yak is high on those averages only, which means that they're not making these plays down the field, right? Like, so that's the key difference between the two teams and why Ottawa probably ended up winning this game. Now, Ottawa on the flip side though is not a offensively dynamic team, right? They're not putting up 40 points a game, right? They're winning this game with ball control. They're doing it, but Drew Brown is playing smart, and that's really where you're seeing it from that standpoint, right? Like you see this down the field, stretching the field, but it's all smart plays, like 5 for 7 on receptions and targets, 5 for 9. That's a little bit lopsided, but 3 for 5, 3 for 5, 2 for 2. Like he's making smart decisions in catching the people in situations that they need to be. Now he did have 2 interceptions in this game, which I would like to see him still try to clean up in the process, but it's his first year as a true starter, so he's gonna make these mistakes as he's growing into this role. But I think overall, if you're an Ottawa fan or covering Ottawa, that might make you a fan. You should be really happy with the overall play of Drew, because he has been doing this all season long, where he's been making smarter decisions than what we've seen in the past, and it's improving week in and week out, even though it may not be translating to points.
This is true. That's definitely something I can attest to. I mean, you don't bring in a Drew Brown for no reason, right? Last
Right.
season we saw Dustin Crum, run all over the field, but he could never do anything in the passing game. He was not stretching the field at all. I mean, I think he finished last season with under 10 yards per passing attempt, which is pretty insane to me. But ultimately Drew Brown's turned around and completely lit it up in the pass game, and maybe he doesn't necessarily give us the run threat that Crum did, but he's also mobile enough to run when needed. So it's a little bit different than the MBT situation, where he's, MBT's getting up there in age. He can run, but it's not going to even be like, his third option. It's not, he's going to do everything he can to get rid of that ball before he takes off and runs. So that's definitely, a little bit different situation. But ultimately, like I said, I kind of expected an Ottawa win here. Glad to see them finally get to a point where they won 4 games, early enough into the season to where they're not already eliminated from the playoffs. That's actually the first time I've witnessed it as a fan / somebody who covers the team that made me a fan. So, yeah, definitely excited to see that for Ottawa. It's not a lot of fun to cover a team when they're not doing much winning. I can tell you that much. So, it's definitely been struggle, but here we are, finally seeing it come around the right end of the stick. So I'm excited to see it, and I'm excited to see it because I think Bob Dice is a good coach too, and I don't think he got a lot of credit for what he was able to do with the team last year. It's hard to really value or explain the value of a coach when they're not winning, and now you can kind of see how valuable and how important Bob Dice really is to this team. So I really hope that we not only make the playoffs, but actually, do some damage, give him some reason to be here for a long time, because I really like him as a coach. And I think he brings the right energy and mentality to the team, which Ottawa really needed.
Yeah, for Ottawa's sake, even if you don't make the playoffs, I think just any improvement over last year is good. And so far, I think we're seeing it, whether it's Drew Brown or Raquel Armstead, who's been a surprise to a lot of people. I think that's something that you kind of kind of build upon, right? Justin Hardy's had a really good year. Dominique Rhymes, you brought in for a veteran presence, and he's producing when his numbers called upon. You don't need him to come in and be a takeover kind of guy, and obviously Khalil Pimpleton. So obviously there's somebody's making the right decisions and putting players in place to succeed here with this franchise, and it's just a matter of whether or not they can put it all together. So even if you don't end up making the playoffs, I know they spent a lot of money in the offseason, but even if they don't end up making the playoffs this year, as long as there's any kind of improvement and they're hovering around that playoff push, that's really all you can ask for in this situation, because like you said, that does go back to the coaching. And I think you're seeing it a lot with Drew Brown this year as well, because it is his first full-time starter as a starter, and there was going to be some of those quote unquote rookie mistakes, and I feel like for the most part he's weeded a chunk of those out. Still needs some work, but it's moving in the right direction at least.
Yeah, I would agree. And it's been a large step in the right direction, which is saying a lot, because it's been a long time since Ottawa has seen any sort of positivity. Last time they had a winning season was 2018, so it's been a little while. But moving on to the next game, which has seen a lot of winning recently, that would be, of course, the Saskatchewan Roughriders, who are quickly looking like the best team in the league. And if I'm not mistaken, you made a comment on Summer Showcase talking about the ELF today that I believe I interpreted as you might think Saskatchewan's the best team in the league right now.
Yeah, easily. Look, has it been pretty? No, but the team is not built to be pretty. I think that's the one thing that a lot of people are mistaken here. Like, they're looking at Saskatchewan and they're going, "Oh, well, they're not winning in convincing fashion." They don't need to win in convincing fashion. At the end of the game, if those clocks are all zero and they have more points than the other team, that's all that matters. And I know that they had that one loss that looked pretty rough, but in this league, you're going to have your off days. It's going to happen, and there's some really good teams in this league. I think Saskatchewan, though, might be the most balanced team. And I use that word a lot to describe the Vienna Vikings and the ELF, and I'm sure my ELF fans are getting sick and tired of hearing it. But it's really important to when it comes to football, having a balanced team. And this team is winning not only tough games, but they're winning with a backup quarterback that basically got booed for being the first overall pick in the USFL draft a few years ago, like in certain spots. And he's looked every bit the part of being a startable quarterback in this league. Is he there yet as a whole? Probably not, but he's looking the part. And a lot of that is because of this balance. AJ Ouellette's been kind of slow starting for the most part. He's kind of warmed up a little bit moving into looking better. He is hurt now. We'll get into that in a little bit, but I'm very curious as to what's going to happen with this team. But let me ask you this, Sam. Can you name one consistent wide receiver on Saskatchewan that's been at the top of the stat sheet every week, or has it been somebody different every week?
Yep, you took the words right out of my mouth there. It was just a couple weeks ago we saw Sean Bain Jr., I think, score 3 touchdowns in a single game and just dominate. And now, in this game, 3 targets, 2 receptions, and 23 yards, and it's a totally different receiver that's topping the charts. So you have a great point there. They have done a great job of spreading the ball around, taking what the defense gives them, and then playing efficient football. Shea Patterson was actually one of the highest ranked quarterbacks in terms of PFF grade, which I know, PFF is subjective, obviously. They don't know the play call. They don't know exactly what he was supposed to do or what the read was on a given play. But at the same time, it is an indicator of efficiency. And obviously in this game, Shea Patterson was very efficient. That's all Saskatchewan needs. And it kudos to, Corey Mace and the coaching staff there. I'm going to use a car analogy. I'm a former mechanic, but In the car world, there's a saying that it can be fast, reliable, and cheap. Pick two, right? So in Saskatchewan, what they picked was reliable and not necessarily cheap, but I guess that was a bad analogy, but
No, I know, but I know what you mean, though. I mean, you could report, you could change it from cheap to flashy. You know what I mean? Like it's not, it's the
thank
overall
you. There you go.
appeal, right? Like it's the overall appearance of it. Like it's not flashy,
Exactly.
but it's reliable. You know,
Exactly, and that's exactly what I was trying to say. This isn't like a hopped up race car that might leave you on the side of the road. This is your Honda where you're gonna hop in and that shit's gonna start every single time and it's gonna get you into the end zone every single time. So
right?
it's important. It's important that Corey Mace, a defensive coach, comes into Saskatchewan and immediately shows them how to win the hard way. So now, down the line, when Trevor Harris comes back and they have a little bit more of a pass game, they have a little bit more of an offensive threat, all of a sudden this team is going to really hit its stride. They've been doing all of this with a backup quarterback who started the season as realistically their short yardage option.
Yeah, exactly. This team reminds me a lot of the early starting to be successful Detroit Lions. That's what it reminds me of. Like when Dan Campbell first came in, he kind of changed the overall, appeal of this. They had some success early, not a lot of pretty wins, kind of these grimy, gritty wins, learning how to win. Um, but they were going to bite your kneecap off, as he would say. And Saskatchewan is what this team reminds me so much of that team. Are they there yet to be considered a championship contender? Who knows, right? The CFL is not the NFL. There's only 9 teams, not 32 to fight through or 31 to fight through to get there. So, um, is it possible? Sure. I mean, with the way they're playing right now, yeah, it's just going to be curious if they can hold up to the whole season all the way through. So, um, when Trevor's Harris comes back, it's going to be a huge boost to the offense, and that's kind of scary in a sense because Shea Patterson's played really well, for this team. So they have some good things cooking down there over there in Saskatchewan, and they should really really be excited about this team this year specifically.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just keep going back to the fact that Corey Mace has won a Grey Cup everywhere he has gone. Whether it doesn't matter what position he played, if he was a player, if he was a position coach, if he was a coordinator, now it's his time to win one as a head coach. So, it doesn't happen in year one. I don't know yet, but he sure as hell is putting his team in a good position to get there. And that's the first step. Get to the playoffs, get to the Grey Cup, then put yourself in a position to win. And honestly, if you look at this team now, if I had to bet on any one team to win one game, it's going to be Saskatchewan every single time because
Mm,
of how they're winning. They're winning those grind them out gritty games where, it could be anybody. They just find a way to win. And that's honestly a credit to, once again, the coaching staff. I think I will preach this until somebody proves me wrong, but in my mind, anytime you have a close win or a close loss, it comes down to coaching. And it's typically one coaching decision throughout that game that you can point to and be like, that changed the momentum of the game. And it's not always true. Obviously, there's an exception to every rule, but pretty often it feels like that's the case. We've spent a lot of time talking about Saskatchewan and obviously their success. What do you make about Winnipeg? It
I
seemed like they were trying to get it going there for a minute, and now here we are, right back in them not being able to do a thing.
I can't figure it out. The offensive line is absolute hot garbage. It is probably one of the worst offensive lines I've ever seen Winnipeg have. I don't know if that's a coaching thing, a scheme thing, if it's just not having the talent thing. I'm not sure. I can't. I wish I knew. This Winnipeg team is the most baffling team this year at 2-5, sitting there going, why? Um, I will say though that they also don't really have a dynamic wide receiver, and it might be that the turnover is too much for them. Nick Dembski and Drew, what is it, Wolotarski? They're both basically the same player. Um, So it's like, yeah, you got two really good players in that front, but who's your field stretcher? I thought it was Ontario Wilson last week, 2 for 7 this week. Not pretty. Josh Johnson's kind of still trying to find his rhythm in this offense. So injuries have hurt this team. Lawler's hurt, and until Lawler comes back, this team might be. I think the biggest thing to put into perspective is Collaros doesn't really have a safety net. Like Brady Oliveira was his safety net this week, but that's not typical for him to have. Oliveira be the safety net. Usually, it's a receiver like a Kenny Lawler that kind of has that um, ability to, I'm going to go get you that first down and not rely on the yak. Like go to the sticks and make that catch. He doesn't really seem like he has that guy for some reason. I thought it used to be Nick Dembski, but this year has not really been Nick at all. So I don't know. I wish I knew where this was coming from.
Yeah, it's been very odd. They found some success in the passing game at times as well, but it just seems like they cannot get over that hump and really get momentum going, which is just absolutely bizarre to watch. After watching this team be so good for so long in the CFL and just really kind of run roughshod over the entire league, it's bizarre. Collaros has been one of the players that I have said on multiple occasions that I thought was an NFL caliber quarterback who chose that he wanted to start. So he's in the CFL. He wants to play. He doesn't want to ride a bench, which I think he's perfectly capable of doing in the NFL. But why do that when you can come be the top quarterback in the CFL, in my opinion? And I believe that's why he's here. But at this point, it's not really working out for him. And I'm kind of wondering, like I've said before a couple times this season, are we watching the end of Zach Collaros as, the prominent quarterback in the CFL at this point?
I don't know if I'm ready to go that far just yet. I think Winnipeg also has some other issues, and it might be a coaching staff thing on this one, but the red zone efficiency has been really dreadful. A lot of field goals, and I don't know, and that's not a knock on the field goal kicker or anything along those lines. It's just you can't finish in the red zone. Like that, you're not going to win a ton of games, and I feel like that that is also a large part of this offensive line issue as well. Is when you start, the field shrinks, right? When you get into the red zone, it starts. I know they have huge end zones, but like even that, it still shrinks, right? And they haven't found a way to just bunch it in when it matters the most. And this game in particular, kudos to Saskatchewan for finding a way to stop a lot of the drives where it looked like they were going to, either get within 3 or get close to put this game over. But it's just red zone efficiency in this offensive line. This offensive line is terrible, and I think it's hurting the defense because I think this is still a solid defense. It's just they can't get off the field, unfortunately.
Completely fair. Honestly. And then on the other side of that, you've got the best defense in the league currently. So yeah, tough matchup for Winnipeg, no doubt. But at the same time, it's just shocking to not see them put up more of a fight in some of these games.
Yeah.
Speaking of putting up a fight, and in this particular case, when we didn't expect it, talk about an upset in this Hamilton and Toronto game. I did not see him coming. I definitely picked Toronto in this game. And yet again, we saw, kind of them flirt with a quarterback change once again because Dukes wasn't getting the job done. But at the same time, he was doing what he's been doing very good all season long, taking what the defense gives him. He just wasn't able to really take advantage when it mattered the most. And we saw Arbuckle come in. But what do you make of the last couple of weeks for Toronto? It seems they're up, they're down, they're all over the place.
This one was interesting to me because this one reeked of panic, which is something that we haven't really seen a lot from Toronto, even when they're losing. Is been the panic. Like Hamilton came out and kind of smacked him in the mouth. It was 17-7 at halftime, and I feel like they were trying to get Dukes to do something that he's not comfortable doing. right? Like, go out there and be that gunslinger. Go out there and start making those plays because we're losing. Like, let's go do it, which very, very weird. They got away from the run game, which was kind of stupid because Kadeem Carey was eating them up early and then 11 carries. Like, and I know there's not, and I know that this isn't the NFL, so there's not, that they lose an extra down, but 11 carries for a guy like Kadeem Carey who's averaging 6 yards a pop is it. You like AJ Willett had 17. You can find a way to get this guy the ball 17 times, like, and watch him at 6 yards a clip dominate a game, right? Like, it's just the way that it is. But yeah, Arbuckle, he's a veteran of the league. He started. He's been around. He knows what he's doing. So it's not entirely surprising to see Arbuckle outproduce Dukes in this situation because, correct me if I'm wrong, but this is Duke's rookie year up here in the CFL, or second year?
Second year,
yeah. So, Arbuckle's been around for a while. This is why you keep a guy like Arbuckle on staff, right? And correct me if I'm wrong, but he has experience also with the offensive coordinator, right? There's a history there.
Head coach, actually.
Oh, the head coach, yeah, the head coach. Yeah. So, I mean, there's a history there. So that's why you bring a guy in like Arbuckle. Now, do I think that you make a quarterback change? No. I think Dukes has got you to the point. I mean, what's Toronto? 5-2, 5-3,
3-3.
No, they're 3-3. So 3-3. So, like, I mean, they're not out of it by any means. It's not probably where you want to be while you wait for Chad Kelly. But we talked about Cam Dukes. Like, if you can get to a point where you're at 500 or better when Chad Kelly comes in, it's a huge boost to this team, right? Like, it's just Dukes did his thing. I just don't think that you make the change yet. It's just it's too. Now, if he comes out in the first half next week and completely shits the bed, then sure. But he's you still almost won this game. The fourth quarter went your way. It just, you let it get away from you too far, and I think that's part of the coaching staff's issue. Like, I feel like that they panicked through the first three quarters and tried forcing Dukes to do something that he wasn't comfortable doing at the time.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. I mean, before we move on from this game, there's one thought that I wanted to get through, and I'm sure you'll definitely agree. But how good is Janorian Grant? I mean, oh my Lord, he is so much fun to watch every time he gets the ball in his hand. Over 100 yards on punt returns in this game. Had a 97-yard kick return for punt return for a touchdown, and he has just been unbelievable this season. He is, for lack of a better term, the best kick returner, punt returner in the league, and that's saying a lot because there's a lot of really good ones in the CFL. Including Devontae Dedman and multiple other guys. I'm blanking names at the moment. I'm not sure why, but yeah, it's crazy to see him constantly somehow find the end zone every week. It seems like
he's been doing it forever. I mean, he did a lot of it with Winnipeg back when he was Winnipeg, and now that he's with Toronto, like, it's not changing anything. I mean, he's that dude, plain and simple. Like,
yep, 100%. Before we get to the next game, we're going to take a quick commercial break and shout out our sponsors.
This is Current. It's the card my parents used to pay me for mowing the lawn, running errands, and doing well in school. This is the card I used when we got the idea to make our own clothes. And we spread the word, drove downtown, and sold everything we made. This is the card I use to do the things that really matter. This is Current. Visit current.com and download the app for free today.
I'm just being myself, cool as can be. When I'm being myself, you wish you were me. It's so easy. Get out your own way. It's just so easy.
Upside, the only app that's so good that Jesus came back to completely promote it himself in that commercial. But then also shout out to Current. I personally think it's the best bank on the market. I love it. I use it personally. Obviously, that's why we promote it here. And then also the official banking sponsor of the Shady Sports Network. So always definitely want to shout out both of them. If you want to try out either one of them, make sure you use our codes. You get special sign-up bonuses for both apps. I believe it's $50 when you sign up for Current, just using our sign-up link. And then also as well as a extra 15-cent per gallon bonus on Upside when you purchase your first fuel there. With that out of the way,
I just want to be the guy in the cowboy hat. That's me right there dancing at the
he looks like he's having a good day.
He was having a very good day.
And I often have good days when I look at the returns that I've gotten from Upside, and I'm not trying to be cheesy because I am nearing $1,000 back.
Nice.
Yeah, it's crazy to think, but there's a reason why I swear by the app. I'm not just saying it for no reason. Realistically, a free app that pays you cash back, how much better does it get?
Right, no doubt.
But anyway, back to the most surprising game of the weekend, in my personal opinion, and there were a lot of them. There were a lot of them. Great games this weekend for sure from the CFL, but I did not see Calgary beating BC in this game. Man, I'm just going to go ahead and let you take the lead on this one because this is your team.
Yeah, I mean, this is this is the definition of why the games are played on the field, right? Like on paper, this looked like it was a lopsided. It was the high-powered BC offense versus the Calgary defense that just gave up yardage all over the place. And to be honest, they had. Calgary's defense was dreadful. I don't know what happened, but basically after that first quarter, it was Calgary just came out and smacked BC in the mouth for 3 quarters after that. Like, I know this game was 25-24, but it really did not feel like BC was the Lions that we were all expecting, right? Like, this defense found a way to get to them. It was almost like every other play, you could pretty much predict a Calgary a sack, right? Like, it was coming. Clark Barnes is slowly progressing into being a fantastic wide receiver for this league. In this team, Jalen Philpott is coming around. Him and his brother are lighting up the league this year. It's awesome to see. The Reginald Bagleton, the best name in the CFL in my opinion, one of the best names in the CFL in my opinion, and he's a nice little veteran presence there at the receiving corps. So Jake Mayer is still continuing to grow. And it's awesome to see. I mean, 25 for 32 for 307 and 3. That's a fantastic stat line for anybody. It's amazing for Jake Mayer because it's a stat line you never would have thought you would seen before. So a lot of good positives for Calgary, and they may have just laid the blueprint on how to beat this BC Lions team as well. So trust me, the Lions are still a tough out because of this offense and Vernon Adams, but he was 17 for 31. So we did something right. And it started with how our defense played from the jump, really.
Agreed. I mean, honestly, it was very surprising to see Vernon Adams not his usual self. I believe the statistic was that he was coming into this game, and he was just barely off the pace for the passing record for the league. I think he was going to be like 11 yards short of Doug Flutie's 6,400 passing yards. 6,400.
64, yeah.
That's insane. But in this particular game, Vernon Adams did not look like himself at all. And ultimately, it had a lot to do with this Calgary defense, which played extremely well in this game, intercepted them a couple times. They contested what it felt like every single pass. You see it right here in the stat sheet. Justin McInnis targeted 8 times, caught 3 passes. Aiden Eberhardt, Stanley Berryhill, all these guys. It was, when you look at William Stanback and he's the only guy who caught all of his targets, it's for a reason. He was catching them out of the backfield. 14 yards after the catch on 20 reception yards. Most of that came because he was running towards the line of scrimmage untouched before he got there. So, I mean, it's crazy to see this level of this level of dominance on the defensive side when you're playing a team like BC. Now at this point, I'm sure Adams is way off that pace that he was putting up before, where it was like 400-yard game after 400-yard game. But I still think he's the MOP leader of the league, and it's not even close. But we'll see how things go the rest of the way. If a lot of teams are able to start figuring them out like Calgary did, this could get ugly really quick for BC.
I think the thing that was most surprising about this is Calgary's defense did it while letting them run the ball all over them. I mean, 7.1 yard average for William Stanback, 4.7 for Vernon Adams. It's not like they didn't have success running the ball. It was that they just did not care if you ran the ball, right? Micah Awe and Cameron Judge, I think, were basically just like, we don't care. We're not going to let you throw on us. Like, that's basically what's going to happen. And that's basically what they did. The defensive line basically stepped up. I mean, how many sacks did they have on the game? I think it was like, that's only showing one, but I'm pretty sure that I think they had at least 3 that I can think of in tough situations, or at least pressures. Maybe they didn't result in sacks, but they were in the backfield a lot, on the edge and with the D line. So kudos to whatever the scheme was, whatever the game plan was, it worked for Calgary in this game. And they just, secondary played really good.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, great game by Calgary. It takes a lot to shut down Vernon Adams at this point. And like I said, he's the top candidate for MOP at this point in the league. But we are going to actually discuss some of the injury news now, because there's quite a bit of it. And, I'm going to go ahead and pull up the injury reports for a couple teams that we have already. Obviously, they come out throughout the week. You still have a couple practice days for the Saturday and Sunday games, so we haven't gotten those final reports yet. But we're going to go ahead and start with the first game of the weekend, which is, of course, just a second, blank of the team names. Calgary and Saskatchewan and Montreal kick off this weekend on Friday, and Ottawa and Calgary, which are right behind them on Friday as well. So looking at Saskatchewan, they've got a couple different players that are not going to be able to play, namely AJ Ouellette and Keon Schaefer-Baker. So obviously 2 big blows to the Saskatchewan Roughriders right now, but do you think they can weather the storm without Ouellette this week and for the foreseeable future?
I'm very curious to see what's going to happen with Ouellette. Basically because he was starting to find his stride after a slow start. Schaefer-Baker is a tough loss because he's so reliable. He's so dependable. So they're going to need somebody to step into that dependability thing. I think Saskatchewan has enough depth that they can, overcome Schaefer-Baker. It's just more this run game that I'm very curious about, because part of that balance that I talk about with this team comes from Ouellette at that running back spot. So will they be as productive? Hopefully, for their sake that they are. But overall, I think that this injury report is it's going to be tough for Saskatchewan to stay balanced if they don't get a 75% AJ Ouellette replacement, basically.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, Ouellette, he didn't necessarily light the world on fire this past weekend, but what he did do was make sure that there was the threat of the run. So they
went 17 for 88.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it was decent, but it wasn't like, like I said, he didn't light the world on fire necessarily. But it was enough because they knew they had to continue to guard against the run, which it's all you can ask for at this particular case. But moving on to the Montreal, We have a ton of different players here on the 6-game injury list, and it's really starting to rack up for them. But the biggest name you'll see right here near the top, Cody Fajardo, is on the 6-game injured list moving forward. Obviously, as we all know, in the CFL, he can technically come off that list at any point during the next 6 games. But this, in my mind, you get put on the 6-game injury list when the team knows you'll most likely miss at least 3 weeks. They're not going to do this if they think there's a possibility you could come back in 2 games. It just doesn't make a whole lot of sense in terms of roster gymnastics when you can just put a guy on the 1-game injured list and then turn around and make him inactive the next game. You have inactives every game anyway, so that's always an option. But in this particular case, they place him on the 6-game injury list, most likely for that roster exemption, so they can go out and get another player. So interesting to see. But I mean, what are your feelings about this? Could this be a death blow for Montreal, at least for the next 6 games?
I don't know if it's a death blow, but I can tell you right now that this game against Saskatchewan is no longer a battle of the best teams in the league. Primarily because, you don't have Fajardo and you don't have Ouellette. So when these two teams meet later when they're healthy, that could potentially be a battle of the top 2 teams in the league, right? On paper, yes, you'll say it's the battle because they're both 6-1, 5-1.
Yeah, I believe so.
5-1. They're both 5-1 or 6-1, something like that. But so you could say, yes, this is the battle of the 2 best teams in the league. But when you really break it down, is the game that we're getting really from the best 2 teams, right? So I don't know if it's a death blow for Montreal, but it's going to be tough sledding for them, I think, over the course of the next at least 3 to 4 games while they figure out what they're going to do with Fajardo or when they're going to activate him. So if they can come out 50, at 500, hey, I think that's successful. It's similar to what we were talking about with Cam Dukes in Toronto, right? If you can come out at least 500, that's good sledding for when you do get healthy, right? So
Absolutely.
tough matchup against Saskatchewan. AJ Ouellette's not as big of a blow to the Roughriders as Fajardo is to Montreal.
Yeah, completely agree on that case. I mean, Caleb Evans is obviously a capable starter in this league, but is he, everything that Cody Fajardo is? No, he's not. And I think that's going to be a situation where we are going to see a drop off in this particular case, and it might be a drastic one. Evans is kind of known for turnovers. He threw a lot of interceptions while he was with Ottawa as the starter for the past couple seasons. So it's going to be a storyline to watch. Especially because after everything that's gone on the past couple seasons, Ottawa is right there nipping at the heels of Montreal at 4-2. So if they lose a couple games, we could actually see a situation where Ottawa is first in the East, which would just blow my mind. We'll see though. It's gonna be there's still a lot of questions to answer, and one of the questions to answer is, can Ottawa overcome the attrition of this last 12 days? I mean, they just played. This will be their 3rd game in 12 days, and as you can see, they're definitely affected by injuries here. And I mean, some of these guys were already injured and they started to practice and come back. Brandon Dandridge, Elijah McGee, I think Justin Howell, came back a couple weeks ago, but he was still kind of getting over the injury. Tobias Harris played in this last game. He's injured. Money Hunter, same thing. Devontae Dedman was injured the week before, but he is also going to miss this week. And then Zach Pelios is also going to miss this week as well. If there was a little bit more of a turnaround, maybe you see some of these guys play. But in this particular case, with the bye week coming up, I think Ottawa is kind of playing this one safe.
Yeah, this injury report reeks more of depth getting kind of eaten alive more than it is necessarily any impact players that could change a game per se. Like it's a lot of high quality players, rotational players that and a starter in Money Hunter, even though money's been a liability so far this year, but overall, like, he's still a starter. So anytime you lose a starter like that, it gets kind of rough. But it's more the depth part of this that you kind of look at and go, hopefully they don't have any more injuries, because certain spots are starting to look a little thin. So.
Absolutely. And my biggest concern coming out of this game was not even a concern going into it. So what worries me is when you have our Darius Pickett returning kicks, and you have this kind of issues in your secondary with Brandon Dandridge and all these 5 different players that are out, especially Money Hunter and Tobias Harris, who are, prominent players over the past couple of weeks. If Pickett gets hurt, especially on a kick return, that is going to be one of the worst mistakes Ottawa could have made. I'm not saying that Pickett isn't one of those players that you want the ball in his hand all the time. He's electric no matter what he does. But at this time, I mean, if it was me, I would be putting Pimpleton back there. If you want one of these players to, first of all, if you want an electric player back there as a kick return, Pimpleton's your guy. He's obviously very quick. We all saw the huge passing play he had a couple weeks ago, where he broke a 70-yard touchdown. And his burst it's no joke. But at the same time, I guess they're a little concerned about their depth at wide receiver as well, with Dedman out, Addison still a little bit banged up, and Pimpleton is a starter. But, man, I think at this particular case, Pickett's got to be more valuable to the defense than what Pimpleton is to the offense, if that makes sense.
No, it makes perfect sense. And Pimpleton's also dynamic enough and electric enough that you want to get the ball in his hands, right? That's essentially what it boils down to, is you want to get that ball in his hands, so that way you're, getting your playmakers the ball, essentially. So
Agreed. And then Calgary, which seems to be one of the teams that is a little bit less affected by injuries at this particular point, they're only missing a couple different players. And granted, I could not find their most recent injury reports, so it's not giving us the outs and whatnot. But when you have most of these guys full participants, early in the week, chances are they're probably going to play. So, I mean, you see Clark Barnes limited. That's a little bit concerning. Kyle Saxeed, that's concerning as well. You got 3 different players who didn't practice, but it doesn't look to be anybody who could potentially sink this team overnight if he doesn't play this weekend.
I'll be honest with you, it's a huge relief, because last year I felt like we were injured every other day. So it's nice to see a nice looking injury report at this point in time. Hopefully Barnes is okay, but I want his shoulder to be 100% for the stretch. So if they keep him out this game, so be it. Like, I'm not worried about that.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I mean, especially given the fact that Calgary's found, some playmakers at wide receiver. They've got multiple different guys out there that can make a play. So, I don't think they're necessarily going to be hurting if Barnes misses this game. I think they can weather that for one game for sure. But let's get to our predictions and give you the betting odds while we're at it. Let me pull that up right quick. Also, make sure you're checking out our betting sponsor, BetUS. They have a really, really sweet sign-up bonus. When you put in $50, you get like 125% match on your first 3 deposits. I mean, that right there, you should be winning some money. So definitely check them out. All links in the description below. And on that note, let's get to this first game, which is obviously Saskatchewan versus Montreal. You got a +3.5 for Saskatchewan, which is kind of interesting. Obviously, that's probably because Montreal's the home team. Maybe they didn't get the notice that Cody Fajardo's hurt. But you got a +155 money line, 49 over under. Montreal's a 3.5-point favorite, -180 for them in the money line, and a 49 over and under, like I just said. This sounds like some easy money to me, but what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I'm taking Saskatchewan +3, and the under in this one. I just don't think there's going to be enough firepower on offense for Montreal without Fajardo. you think you said Caleb Evans earlier is a startable quarterback in this league. I don't really think he is, unfortunately. Don't get me wrong, I don't mind Caleb Evans as a backup to come in and plug and play for a game, but as a starter, I don't want anything to do with him. And this situation going against a Saskatchewan team that is so well balanced, so well coached. They believe in themselves, are on a hot streak. It doesn't bode well for Montreal without Fajardo. And yeah, I think it's going to be a rough day for Alouette fans. So I take Saskatchewan plus 3.5. I take the under in this game at the 49 because I think this game's going to be like 23 to like 15.
All right, 23-15 Saskatchewan.
Yeah.
That definitely makes sense to me. I am also picking Saskatchewan in this one. I mean, if Caleb Evans is going to be your starter, I can't go any other way, especially with the way this defense has been playing as of recently. I don't care who's the home team in this one. I'm picking Saskatchewan. So give me Saskatchewan. I agree that you should probably take the under as well. I mean, obviously, we've talked about Saskatchewan's winning ugly games. They're not scoring a lot of points. In last week's game between Winnipeg and Saskatchewan, 28 total points. So
28 total, yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty low number in professional football. So I would definitely say we're going to be very, very on the underside here. And you picked 38 points. That's probably pretty damn close to where it's going to be. I'm actually going to put it a little bit higher on the Montreal side. I'm going to give them 17 points, but I think it's going to be 30-17 Saskatchewan. And honestly, I think there might be a defensive score in there for Saskatchewan at some point.
Oh, yeah, most likely.
So also the under, but only by barely. Next week, game of the weekend is, of course, my Ottawa Redblacks hosting your Calgary Stampeders. And this is basically a pick 'em. So talk about an interesting game for us to predict. Why don't you kind of lead us off here?
Yeah, non-biasly, even though it's going to seem like it is, I'm taking Calgary in this game. And the -1, I think they're going to. I think they'll cover the spread. It's not a very deep spread, but Calgary is an interesting team. Jake Mayer coming off a very hot performance last week against the BC Lions team. This team is confident. It's full of. I think they're starting to believe in themselves to be able to win these games. This is going to probably be an over as well. I think they'll go over 51.5 in this one. Ottawa has not been really firepower offensively, but they are very well established in the ball control game, which could slow Calgary down overall, but I think we'll see some fireworks in the second half. I'm taking Calgary in this game, 31-25.
Wow. Okay, 31-25, so 56 total points. That'd be a fun game to watch for sure. I'm so hesitant on this game. Everything in me wants me to pick Ottawa, and I think I'm gonna pick Ottawa, but at the same time, man, it would not surprise me in the slightest if Calgary wins this game. It's because of how important it could be to the playoff potential of Ottawa. If they win this game and Montreal turns around and loses to Saskatchewan, they are tied for first place in the East. So that the gravity of the situation, I think, might get to Ottawa a little bit, not to mention the injury attrition. So, I mean, you look at all those injuries, I think Calgary is going to be able to dice this defense up quite well. And, it's going to be a high-scoring game for sure. There's not going to be a whole lot of defensive stops in this one, in my opinion. But, I definitely think, like I said, I'm going to go with Ottawa. I'm only barely confident in them winning this game. But, let me shoot 28-26 is going to be my score.
Okay.
Just barely in the over as well, but I definitely expect this to be a high-scoring game. Next game of the weekend is the Winnipeg Blue Bombers at the Toronto Argonauts, another 1-point pick'em, which again, a little surprising to see this be a 1-point game. But yeah, overall, you got a 49-point over/under, -107 money line for Winnipeg, -113 for Toronto. What are your thoughts on this one?
Yeah, I'm taking Toronto. I think Cameron Dukes will get the start. I think they're going to cover that 1-point spread as well, and I'm taking the under in this game as well. It's an interesting thing because both these teams have not been the typical same old teams that we've expected them to be, right? The blue juggernauts, essentially. Toronto, I think, is just playing better ball right now overall, even though their record may not be super impressive. But Winnipeg's even worse at 2-5. The offensive line is kind of garbage. 23-17, Toronto.
Okay. Yeah, I'm also picking Toronto. I don't quite understand why this one's so close, especially with Toronto being the home team. I understand that, Toronto didn't win last week, but they still scored 24 points and Winnipeg scored 9.
Yeah.
I just have a hard time believing that Winnipeg's going to have some sort of offensive explosion against Toronto, especially because Toronto's defense is pretty solid. Yeah, I definitely think this is going to be around the 20-point mark for Toronto. So I'm actually going to go 24. And actually, man, I'm going to go 24-10. I don't see Winnipeg scoring a whole lot of points in this game. And I know Toronto's defense is not as good as Saskatchewan, but I don't have a lot of faith in Winnipeg right now.
Yeah, it's hard to.
Now, this game could be very interesting. Hamilton finally gets their first win last weekend versus Toronto, which I don't think most people saw coming. But now you have them up against Edmonton, and Edmonton is at home. Edmonton's a 3.5-point favorite in this game, probably most likely because of the fact that they have not had issues scoring points. That's why you see a 53-point over in this one. But man, how can you have a winless team as a favorite?
Yeah, it doesn't make much sense to me. It might just be that there's a lot of betting going on that's leaning Edmonton's way. I don't know. Hamilton's coming off their first win, so I mean, it's not like this game is the battle of two, incredible powerhouses. I took Edmonton last week. They bit me in the ass, but I also picked against Hamilton. So I'm going to take a break. Man, this game's tough to choose. I'm going to take Edmonton, but okay. I'm not sure that they cover.
I could totally see that. I mean, just based off everything that's happened to them this season.
Yeah, I feel like that their losses have all been so close that their win is probably going to be super close too. I'll take Edmonton and the over at 27-26.
All right, 27-26.
Until they come down to a rouge.
Man, that'd be awesome to see, but it might, honestly. Man, this is tough. It's a really tough game.
A game featuring one win and 11 losses should not be this difficult to pick. I'm just going to throw that out there.
I mean, yes and no, because it seems like neither one of these teams wanted to win a game until this past weekend. But
I still don't think they want to win a game. That's the thing. I think Hamilton accidentally won. I don't.
That's fair. That's fair. I mean, they definitely. I mean, Toronto was coming back there at the end, and they kind of shot themselves in the foot. So I could see that for sure. I'm gonna go Hamilton though. I just have more faith in them than Edmonton right now. I hope this is the breaking point for Edmonton, and they just start Trey Ford going forward. Trade MBT to a team where he can go to a playoff run for what might be his last season. Let him go to Montreal. That seems like a perfect fit to me. But we'll
But I
see.
mean, Fajardo's only on the 6th game though. Like I want to see MBT start somewhere or play if he goes somewhere, because it's just I feel like he's playing too good.
Well, and that's the thing. In my personal opinion, I don't know that Fajardo would unseat MBT if he came back. You look back at their Grey Cup
Well,
season last season,
you
Fajardo was
can't.
not that good.
Yeah, but you can't. I mean, you won a Grey Cup with him as a starter. You can't bench him.
Keep in mind his MBT's last season as a starter for Toronto before he gave way to Chad Kelly, got him to the playoffs, and ultimately Chad Kelly kind of took over and took him to the Grey Cup. But I mean, I'm just saying they definitely have had a pretty good run, or he's had a pretty good run in the CFL, and I think he could definitely be a final piece to a team like Montreal. But alas, we'll see. Edmonton will probably hold on to him and start him all season long and give Trey Ford like 6 more snaps the rest of the year. But yeah, I'm picking Hamilton. I'm going to say 30 by Hamilton, and that's a lot. To 24 by Edmonton. And actually, Edmonton might score more points than that. It might be closer than that. So we're both taking the over in this one, and we are split. I'm taking Hamilton. He's taking Edmonton. But that seems like a perfectly good place to kind of begin to shut this one down for the night. So any final thoughts before we get out of here?
Not really. I mean, Hamilton and Edmonton could really go either way. I don't think it really matters, but the CFL has been a great addition to football. I'm glad they're having success on CBS as well, and it's different. It's a different type of American football, but it's a lot of fun to watch. So give it a shot and enjoy it, because it's definitely enjoyable stuff. So.
Absolutely. Fast paced. There isn't a lot of downtime because these teams have to convert in, 2 plays. So it's a lot of fun to watch. But, if you haven't caught a game, it's on CBS Sports. You can't get much more accessible than that. And, just real quick before we get out of here, shout out to CBS Sports. They have quickly become the go-to network for alternative football. And I just love to see it. Seeing a triple header where you can watch an AFL game, a CFL game, and then an AFL game, that I will never get over. That was super cool to see. And then here soon we'll have the IFL championship game during the CFL season as well. So it's just really cool to see. So I hope they keep it up. CBS Sports is putting these leagues on the map, and it's important for their growth long term and for their survival long term. So really, really like what CBS Sports is doing, and I hope they continue it. But that seems like a perfectly good way to shut this down for the night. Really appreciate everybody who tuned in. If you haven't done so already, make sure you like, comment, share this with your friends if they're CFL fans. And if you haven't done so already, hop over to the YouTube channel, give us a subscribe. We are very, very close to 1,500 subscribers. I would love to hit that in the next week before we close out July, and I think we could do it with your help. So if you haven't done so, it's free to do. It's not going to cost you a thing. And in turn, it helps us continue to create great content that you hopefully enjoy. You guys stuck with us this long. You must have enjoyed some of it. So go hit that like button for us. We really appreciate it.